I've slept under more stars than most people see in a lifetime. I've woken to owls and the hiss of rain and the quiet confidence of a fire that survived the night. But after 10 years in the backcountry, there was one season, one stretch of nights, that made me stop camping alone for a long time. One night, I almost quit forever. This is a list of 10 creatures I and others met in the woods and on empty roads. Creatures that aren't monsters from a storybook, but shapes of human malice and staged terror, the way someone arranges fear like a message. Some are mine to tell. Others come from drivers and neighbors who called police and later learned to breathe again. I'll be blunt. Entries 10, 6, and 7 are eyewitness accounts adapted from real incidents. The teddy outside our tent, the nearly fatal backroad lure, and the neighborhood stalking and attempted abduction. The rest are built from the same cold logic: isolation, deception, and the hunger of someone who thinks anonymity is enough to hide what they do. If you love true encounters that make the hair on your neck stand up, hit subscribe and ring the bell. This one keeps getting worse as it goes. Stay with me until Chapter 7. You won't sleep after that. 10. The Silent Satyr. It looked like something a child would leave on a rock, and nothing more. That was the problem. We'd set camp in a small saddle between two ridges, Dennis and I. Stove out, sleeping pads aligned, the little lantern beyond the tent sticky with bug spray. I remember waking to the sound of something small hitting the tarp, a soft thud in the gray that comes right before dawn. At first I thought it was a raccoon. Then I saw it. A damp, filthy teddy bear sitting upright on the flat stone that served as our makeshift kitchen table, its button eyes turned straight at the tent. There's a smell that comes from something left outside for a long time, mildew and the sour tang of wet stuffing. The bear's fur had clumped into thin ropes, its face was streaked with dirt. Whoever left it had placed it so it would be the first thing visible through the vestibule when you unzip the door. Not on the path, not near a tree, right there. Dennis swore he hadn't put it there. He swore at a lot of things that morning. We went through a checklist, the obvious, the boring. Wildlife, neighborhood kids, pranksters. None of it sat right. A teddy on a rock isn't a threat in itself. It was a sign, someone who could walk into our camp without waking us and wanted us to know they had. What made it threatening was the intention behind the thing. It was crafted to be uncanny, childlike but wrong. The bear's head was tilted as if listening. When we took it apart in the light, you do the stupid things when adrenaline still runs. We found a small loop of twine sewn into the hem like a handle, as if it had been hung and then taken down. Someone had staged a toy in the place where it would be unavoidable. We packed and left that morning, or at least we tried.
Dennis kept glancing back at the stone like it might follow us. If you camp in the backcountry long enough, you learn to treat odd things as warnings. Don't ignore a warning just because it's wrapped in fur. 9. The Creek-Faced Doll. There's a particular quiet to places where water runs slow. The creek near that campsite had the steady whisper of cold water over shale, the kind of sound that fills your skull and makes you think nothing else exists. It was there, by the shallow bend. Someone had propped a small plastic doll against a washed log, its hair matted and its face streaked like something had cried through the paint. I found it on a mid-afternoon walk while scouting upstream for a better campsite. The doll's head was cocked toward the water, like a child leaning over the bank. Someone had tied a faded ribbon around its neck, the sort of ribbon that looked normal until you realized it had been tied with care. The ribbon had been knotted and tucked, not the quick drop of a passerby. Whoever placed it wanted someone to see. Later, at dusk, we noticed fresh boot marks on the muddy bank, 2 sets, deep and uneven, as if whoever left the doll had walked there and returned. The sounds that night felt closer. A twig snapped 3 times. Not the random chatter of squirrels, but purposeful, spaced like counting. This creature, the way I think of it now, is not monstrous in the supernatural sense. It's a message that the woods, even those with babbling creeks and comfortable splashes underfoot, can be someone's stage. They choose props. They choose how the scene will make you feel. That doll stayed with me for days, the image folded into the small moments when the world should have been ordinary. 8. The tree-line eyes. Headlights bobbing down a single-lane road, breath fogging the glass, wind whistling in the vents. That's where I first noticed the glints. It was late, and my partner was asleep, the car warm behind us. We had this stretch of road that cut through a narrow stand of pines. At night, the slope made little pools of shadow. A glint catches the eye naturally. Metal, a watch, the rim of a glass. 2 glints, then 3, spaced along the edge of the tree line. I slowed, and then stopped. 2 figures stood motionless in the understory, their faces hidden, only the reflection of my headlamp catching on something. Maybe a scope, maybe a watch face. The effect was animal at first, a dozen reflective eyes staring back. But up close, the spacing was wrong for deer. There were human silhouettes pressed against bark, their outlines flat, held like cutouts. One of them lifted a hand, not in greeting but like a puppet, slow, deliberate. They were watching the road like it was a stage. They intended to know every car that came by, the type, the number of occupants, how many were likely to stop. That night we drove on, but for weeks I saw those glints in the corners of my vision, 2 or 3 bright dots, just beyond the reach of light.
The danger here is patient surveillance. A person who waits by the tree line for hours knows more about you than any passing driver might imagine. If you see lights in the ditch that don't move, if you see someone unnaturally still at the edge of the timber, remember that stillness is often the shadow of an intention. 7. The neighbor's shadow. This one is the reason I warn people in town now, not just out in the forest. The woods can hide a creature. Neighborhoods can breed one. The worst one I ever saw didn't wear a mask. It wore a familiarity like a coat. NM lived 2 houses down from me for years. She walked her dog at dawn, got packages, waved when we were both taking out trash. At first, the signs were small. Missing packages left strewn on the stoop. A plant pot moved to the wrong side of the door. Fingerprints on glass that she didn't have an explanation for. Then came the night she woke up with the taste of cloth in her mouth and the scent of someone else's breath close enough to count. She told me later that it started with the deliveries. She noticed shoes missing from porches, but then ornaments and small things would show up at her gate. A single child's shoe, a folded toy, nothing of value, but all of it staged. Whoever left those things was making a map with them, the kind that only needs to be read by someone paying attention. The attempted abduction happened at dusk on a weekday, when daylight was thinning and visibility dropped between the trees and lampposts. NM had just finished locking her front door when she saw a figure moving in the yard across the street. Someone who didn't belong in that polite lived-in scene. She said she turned across the street and saw the figure step out of the bushes on her side, fast, with a cloth covering their hands like a glove, eyes like someone who had been rehearsing this. He tried to pull her. He covered her mouth, and he moved with the kind of steadiness you see in people who practice the same motion until their muscles forget anything else. NM fought. She tells it without sensationalizing the pain, but with the clarity of someone who remembers the mechanics of survival. And in that fight she bit and kicked and found enough leverage to tear free and run. She screamed until someone in a house opened their door. He fled into alleyways. The police later found him hiding in the crawlspace of an older home nearby. They arrested him. His name went on a sheet somewhere in a report. I'll call him A. There are details I won't repeat because they belong to NM, not to this story. But I will say this. The real horror was less the physical close call, and more the months before it, the build-up of being watched. NM slept with every light on for 3 nights after, then with nothing at all. She started attending therapy because the world compressed into places you once trusted. She changed her locks.
She learned to make her comings and goings unpredictable, which reads like paranoia, but is actually strategy. When the police found A, he had evidence on him, staged items, stolen mail, things that connected him to a pattern. The arrest confirmed what NM already knew, and yet it didn't wipe away the images that lived in her bedroom at night, the weight of a hand, the smothering fear. The aftermath was a slow reclaiming. There were court dates and a statement NM gave that made the whole neighborhood lean into what had happened and feel suddenly exposed. People brought her meals. She went to group therapy and then to a counselor who specialized in post-traumatic responses. The neighbor's shadow is terrifying because it's not something you can outrun. It's someone you see at the mailbox 100 times and then recognize as an enemy in the dark. If you hear this and think it can't happen to you because you lock your door, remember, predators choose patience and knowledge. Your best defense is community, attention, and not minimizing the signs when small things start changing. 6. The snow lure. You see a body in the snow and your mind narrows to one simple instruction: help. That instinct is as old as the species.
The snow lure is built to weaponize that exact instinct. A friend, I'll call him Jay, was driving home through a blizzard when he spotted a figure slumped in the ditch, white all around, headlamps slicing through flakes. He almost passed it by because the turns were slick, but something about a lone silhouette alone in a storm stops you. He pulled over. The person looked like any desperate stranger, soaked, shivering, face streaked with frost. Jay eased out and approached, that small human micro-ritual of asking if they're okay. Should he call someone? Do they need a blanket? The figure answered in a half-voice, and then suddenly another voice came from the trees, a human chorus, clipped and organized. 3 men emerged from the snow, like they'd been asleep in the white, moving with the quiet choreography of practiced ambushers. One of them stepped between Jay and the person in the ditch. They weren't wearing hunting gear. They were wearing layers to keep them comfortable for a long wait. Their hands were empty until the moment someone lunges, and then they have the control to make your car a trap. Jay thought to leave his keys on the floor. He thought to shout. He thought of 100 things. The engine stalled once. He moved the car, then something caught. No deep technical details here, only the presence of sudden immobilization and the knowledge that the world narrows when you realize you are not in control. He got away. He credits a combination of luck and quickness, a sudden flare of headlights from the opposite direction, the sound of the approaching town truck, the men melting back into the white. He called it a close miss. The snow lure works because it preys on your humanity.
The figure in the snow is not the threat, it's the bait. If you see someone motionless in a storm, call emergency services and keep a distance. Don't let instinct be the only guide. The flankers. We all like to think there's a difference between noise and intention, between a rustle that's deer and one that's boots. The flankers erase that separation with a single terrifying maneuver. It was late September, and I was driving home from a gig, headlights carving the road into a pale ribbon. The trees leaned close. I remember the sound of my tires on the gravel and the sudden sense of something larger moving in the underbrush, first on the driver's side, then on the passenger's. 2 shadows detached from the tree line and came at the road simultaneously, their bodies crossing like synchronized strips of dark cloth. They didn't run toward me in one straight line. They moved to encircle the vehicle. The idea is not always to snatch you out of the car immediately. Sometimes it's to freeze you, to make you feel like every exit has hands waiting. They approached with measured steps, not the hurried sprint of someone panicked. There was a cadence to it. My car jolted as one of them caught the door handle, teeth of metal scrapping in the dark. I turned the wheel, I stuttered the gear shift, and when the truck lights came around the bend, the 2 figures melted backward into the trees as if they'd never been there. We didn't get a license plate. We got adrenaline and the odd coldness that comes when you've imagined the worst and it stops just outside the frame. The flankers are all about closure. They want to make you feel surrounded without ever having to cross that final line. If you're alone and someone appears to be suddenly circling your car, keep the windows up, lock the doors, and try to maintain distance. If you've ever heard the sound of fingernails on glass in the middle of nowhere, you know how small a thing can become enormous in the dark. 4. The hollow hanger. Some people like to send signals that are almost polite, so polite they become creepier. The hollow hanger is the creature that uses the everyday as an instrument of dread. After a long day on the trail, I once found my clothesline outside the tent with an old jacket hanging from it, my jacket. Not misplaced, not forgotten, hung with the care of someone who wanted me to know they had been close enough to touch what I owned. The sleeves were arranged as if waiting for a person to put them on. That kind of staging implies someone moved through your space and left you a ghost-shaped reminder. It's a small cruelty. It's intimate because a jacket is something that carries your scent, your wear pattern. If someone takes the trouble to return an item to your camp, to drape it like a mannequin, they're telling you they were free to touch what you valued.
The hollow hanger loves the small, personal cruelties, folding a doormat the wrong way, placing a single shoe on your porch step, leaving a scuffed coffee mug where you would find it the next morning. Those gestures are less about theft and more about intimacy weaponized. Someone saying, with tiny exactness, "I was where you thought you were safe." The wound they leave is more cognitive than physical, the knowledge that the line between your private spaces and someone else's access has been violated. 3. The doorframe grip. The road that cuts under the overpass had a single broken street lamp that bobbed light on one side, and that's where the doorframe grip made himself known. This creature waits where people must pass: doorways, thresholds, the narrow bits of the world where you cannot help but slow down. One night I saw a figure half-shadowed in a doorway, grinning like someone practicing emotion. He stood in the frame like he owned the arc of the street. When a passing car slowed, he stepped forward with the kind of casual menace that looks like a joke until it isn't. He didn't speak at first. He let the air do the work, letting the driver's unease do the heavy lifting. What made the doorframe grip chilling was the smile, personal, fixed, and wrong. It told you he had already decided you were part of his set. Sometimes he would step out with an offer. Need a hand? A voice like honey on gravel. Other times he would simply stand in that doorway and watch the faces that passed, tallying the unease. This creature survives in the gaps of town, the places no single person watches carefully all the time. The way to avoid becoming a part of his tally is to keep moving, keep your attention sharp, and use the lighted main paths when you can. If someone stands in a doorway watching you, consider that the gaze itself is a kind of attempt. 2. The pretender. The pretender knows how to act wounded. They learn how to make you stop. There's a natural reflex to help the hurt. The pretender exploits it with small performances: limping step, a blood-smeared shirt, not too dramatic, a voice hoarse from the bracing cold. In one account I read, a driver pulled over for what looked like a man clutching his leg. When the driver got out to help, 2 others slipped from behind the trees, knives glinting in the last light. The driver was lucky. He'd seen too many late-night horror stories to be wholly trusting. This creature's favorite times are dusk and storm, times when the idea of stopping feels like the humane thing to do. They study body language. They prepare an answer to the question, "Are you okay?" They wear pain like a costume. If you're on an empty stretch of road and someone flags you down appearing injured, call the local emergency line and wait in your locked car if you can. Keep distance. It sounds clinical, but the pretender turns goodness into danger.
The line between being humane and being safe is thin when you're alone, and this creature counts on that thinness. 1. The eyes between the trees. This is the one you'll be thinking about when you finally turn the light out. It sits where human and other collide, an image so simple that when it appears, your brain can't decide whether it's an animal, a person, or something that borrowed the worst parts of both. I was hiking alone once, the kind of afternoon that drops to gray without warning because clouds move faster than plans. The valley folded up ahead and the path narrowed. I felt watched, not in that distant way, but in a pressing, intimate way, like the air had ears. Then my headlamp, practiced to cut through fog and dusk, reflected not one bright glint, but a narrow column of glassy light that rose up between 2 trunks, an elongated face, tall and too thin, the eyes too high and close together to be a human's. Its profile wasn't right, but it moved like a person. It tilted its head, organs of light and shadow making a shape I couldn't place. I stepped carefully, because you do when you're alone. It didn't call out, it didn't advance, it watched with patient insistence, the way a person watches a page. Its presence felt like someone had left a hole in the world, and whatever could fit through was peering back. Was it human? I can't tell you. There were subtle things: 2 long fingers, the sound of dried leaves under a weight moving without the rhythm of a normal foot. But it could have been patterned clothing, a scapegoated imagination, anything your brain can assemble in a crisis. That's the point. The eyes between the trees is terrifying because it refuses to resolve. It could be a man who knows how to stand and breed unease, or it could be something else that the woods keep secret. The ambiguity is the blade. You don't need to choose an answer to be afraid. All you need is to remember the sensation, the sudden smallness of your body, the squeezing feeling in your chest, the animal quickness of your breath. The thing faded when I increased distance and used a mirror signal from my pack. Whether it was human or not, I didn't want a closer look. Afterward, what I learned and what you can do. These creatures are not an excuse to live in fear. They're a reminder that the places we assume are neutral, roads, parks, porches, the thin border between town and wild, can be used as theaters of threat by people who plan. The stories here are mostly human, staged toys, fake victims, people who watch you from the edge of trees. But even when the shape isn't human, the feeling is. Someone meant to remind us that our routines can be bent.
If you take one thing from this list, let it be a small set of practices rather than a panic. Don't stop alone for strangers on deserted roads. Call for help. If you see things staged near your home, tell someone. Neighbors, the delivery company, law enforcement.
Trust the odd little signals. A misplaced toy, a jacket on a line, a face that watches from a doorway. Treat them not as curiosities, but as potential warnings. For those who survived something like this, it's okay to be rattled. Therapy isn't a failure of strength. It's a tool for understanding that what happened does not have to live in your bones forever. If someone in your life has experienced an attempted abduction or stalking, listen more than you ask. They need their experience witnessed, not explained away. A final note. I tell these stories because they matter. They're caution, not sensationalism. The people who left those toys, those who staged the roadside or watched from a doorway, whatever you call them, depend on your silence. If their method is bluntness, the cure is attention. If this kept you awake, subscribe for more real encounters from the fringe of the road and the tree line, and tell us in the comments which creature you'd rather meet. Number 7, the neighbor's shadow, or number 1, the eyes between the trees. Be careful out there. If you see something that feels wrong, don't stop alone.